this video, we would like to explain about medieval world. We are from Apollo Group, and this is the group members and their job on making this video. Let's go.
The Church Fathers. The Latin Fathers is the intellectuals in the early church who wrote in Latin profoundly influenced the development of Christian thought in the West. They include Augustine, Jerome, Ambrose, and Gregory the Great. The work of Augustine. Saint Augustine is the most prominent of the Latin Fathers. His work provides one of the best examples of how Christian theologians used pagan culture in the service of Christianity. He born in North Africa and a professor in Milan, focusing on rhetoric in 304 4th century. His most famous work is the Confessions and the City of God. Jerome and the Bible. Jerome is the master of Latin prose. He determined to read the books of God with a zeal greater than I had previously given to the books of men after his dream about Jesus. He is the best scholar among Latin fathers. Jerome enabled to translate the Old and New Testaments into Latin. He also created Latin Vulgate of the Scriptures.
The power of the Pope. In the early century, the churches in the larger cities had great influence in administration. One of the far-reaching developments in the history was the emergence of one bishop, that of Rome, as the recognized leader of the Western Christian Church. The doctrine of patron supremacy believed that the bishops of Rome occupied a preeminent position in the church was grounded in Scripture. Jesus had given the keys to the kingdom of heaven to Peter, who considered the chief apostle and the first bishop of Rome. And of the 4th century, the bishop of Rome, using the title of Papa, or also known as Father, became the English Pope. Pope Leo portrayed himself as the heir of Peter, whom Jesus had chosen to be head of the Christian Church.
In this part, we talk about church and state. Once the Roman emperors became Christians, they viewed themselves as a God's representative on earth. They built churches, influenced the structure of the church organizations, and involved in church government and doctrinal controversies. In 339 until 397 century, Ambrose of Milan was an example of strong and independent bishops. He is recognized as another of the 4 Latin fathers of the ideal Christian Church. When Emperor Theodosius I ordered the massacre, Ambrose denounced it and refused to allow the emperor to take part in the church ceremonies. He proved himself as a formidable advocate of the positions. In the Germanic kingdoms, the kings controlled churches and bishops. On the other hand, Italy, a different tradition prevailed, fed by semi-legendary accounts of papal deaths. For instance, Pope Leo I supposedly caused Attila the Hun to turn away from Rome in 452.
Pope Gregory the Great. Pope Gregory I, commonly known as Pope Gregory the Great, was pope from 590 to 604 AD. He is famous for instigating the first recorded large-scale mission from Rome, the Gregorian Mission. Gregorian Mission or Augustinian Mission was a Christian mission sent by Pope Gregory the Great to convert Britain's Anglo-Saxons to Christian. He successfully initiated the efforts of missionaries to convert England to Christianity and was especially active in converting the pagan peoples of Germanic Europe. Gregory is also well known for his writings such as Pastoral Rule, Pastoral Care, Commentary on Job, Morals on the Book of Job, Dialogo de San Gregorio, and many more, which were more prolific than those of any of his predecessors as Pope.
The monks and their missions. A monk is from Latin monatus, meaning someone who lives alone. Was a man who sought to live a life divorced from the world in order to pursue an ideal of godliness. The Christian monasticism developed first in Egypt, was based on the solitary hermit forsaking all civilized society to pursue spirituality. Saint Anthony was the prosperous Egyptian peasant who followed Jesus' injunction but gave his land to the poor to pursue his ideal of holiness. Likewise, Saint Simeon the Stylite, as the early monks who, unable to live in loneliness, established a new ideal for Christianity. By doing the Feast of Holiness, they attached followers on a wide scale. They were known as monastic communities, which soon became an ideal Christian society that could provide a moral example to the wider society around them.
Benedictine monasticism. Saint Benedict of Nursia established the fundamental form of monastic life in the Western Christian Church. A Benedictine life was a communal one. Monks ate, worked, slept, and worshipped together. Each Benedictine strictly ruled by an abbot, or father, of the monastery, who had complete authority over the monks. In the 8th century, Benedictine monasticism spread throughout the West. The first monastic rules for West women were produced by Caecilius of Arles. They emphasized a rigid cloistering female religious known as nuns. Monasticism played an indispensable role in early medieval civilization. Monks became the new heroes of Christian civilization and role in spreading Christianity to all of Europe.
Irish monks as missionaries. The island had remained a Celtic outpost beyond the reach of the Roman Empire and Germanic invaders. The most famous of the Christian missionaries to Ireland in the 5th century was Saint Patrick, a son of a Roman British Christian. At the time, some of the island had not been part of the Roman world, and the island was fairly isolated from the European continent. By the 6th century, the Irish were eagerly absorbed both Latin and Greek culture, and also fostered education as a major part of their monastic life. The Irish monks were also preserving classical Latin, which is spoken in Latin was being corrupted on the continent into new dialects that eventually became Romance languages. Later then, the emphasis on asceticism led many Irish monks to go into voluntary exile. The exile for the love of God wasn't into isolation, but instead it took the Irish monks into the missionary activity. Irish monks then became a favorite missionaries of Saint Columba on the year 521 until 597, and left Ireland in 565 as a pilgrim for Christ.
The conversion of England. At the same time, the Irish monks were busy bringing their version of Christianity to the Anglo-Saxons of Britain. Pope Gregory the Great had set in motion his own effort to convert England to Roman Christianity. Pope Gregory's conversion techniques emphasized persuasion, as seen in one of his letters that he was willing to assimilate old pagan practices. Likewise, old pagan feasts were given new names and incorporated into the Christian calendar. The Christian feast of Christmas was held December 25th, the day of the pagan celebration of the winter solstice. But there were arguments arose over the differences between Irish and Roman Christianity due to different calendar days for the feast of Easter and matters of discipline. By 700, the English clergy had become the best trained and most learned in Western Europe. Then the English Church retained some Irish features. Boniface, who undertook the conversion of pagan Germans in Frisia, Bavaria, and Saxony, and he had become the most famous churchman in Europe. He was a brilliant example of the numerous Irish and English monks whose tireless efforts made Europe the bastion of the Roman Catholic faith.
Women and monasticism. Women played an important role in monastic missionary movement and the conversions of Germanic kingdoms. The monks and nuns followed common rules under a common head, an abbess rather than an abbot. The abbesses were responsible for giving learning an important role in the life of monastery. For female intellectuals, monasteries offered opportunities for learning not found elsewhere in the society of their day. Path of celibacy. This newfound emphasis on abstaining from sexual relations, especially evident in the emphasis of virginity. In the 4th and 5th centuries, a cult of virginity also moved beyond the walls of monasteries and convents. Groups of women met together to study the importance and benefits of celibacy and supported aristocrats' women. The growing wealth of monasteries. In the 6th centuries, monasteries and local churches became the beneficiaries of grants of land from kings, bishops, and aristocrats. This gift reached a high point in the 8th centuries. As a result, individual monasteries sometimes became as wealthy as landed aristocrats, and Jews also served as instrument of political power.
Christian intellectual life in the Germanic kingdoms. Cassiodorus, the most prominent in century 490 until 585, came from aristocratic Roman family and served an official of the Ostrogothic King Theodoric, and continued the tradition of late antiquity of classifying knowledge according to certain subjects. There are liberal arts, trivium, and quadricium. Bede, the Venerable Bede, in century 672 until 735, was a scholar and product of Christian Anglo-Saxon England. His ecclesiastical history of the English people was a product of the remarkable flowering of English ecclesiastical and monastic culture in the 8th century.